This is 0722 GMT. This edition A of the World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street is timed at 0720 GMT. So it's a few minutes late. So this is the Guardian, which we haven't looked at for 2 days, I think, because the outlet didn't have the Guardian. So this Guardian is continuing on the theme of the lack of testing that is dominating the agenda. And it's very mild, even milder in its coverage of Boris Johnson's kind of retreat, milder than the Beaverbrook legacy of poisonous lying for the ultra-right, the Daily Express. And we shall be looking at the details of the Daily Express's historic concession. The historic concession saying that Boris Johnson admits failure. And that is the actual historic kind of headline. Is it the Express or the Daily Mail? It's the Daily Mail, actually. So it's the same. The Express and the Daily Mail are two parts of the same instrument of lying. But this is historic, whichever lying title has said it. Boris saying that they have failed, his regime has failed, is something that they have not printed, to my knowledge, to my understanding, ever. Boris and failure, they have never put together. Yet that is what Boris has been doing. Boris has done the failing and the lying all his career. And that career has been constructed, fabricated, shored up, promoted, justified, peddled by the lying Daily Mail and the lying Daily Express and the lying Daily Star, which did a historic about turn yesterday in saying that Boris was a disgrace. Boris and company were a disgrace. So Boris, we have failed. That should be a historic moment. Not that the fact is historic. The fact is not historic. That is absolutely consistent with the evidence and the record of Boris Johnson's career and his lying career, especially typified by his lie that the Turks were going to invade the UK if the UK didn't leave the EU, because the Turks were going to join the EU. That was the biggest lie. So when are they going to say that he's a liar as well, that he has lied? I mean, this is a logical question. When are they going to say that he had been lying all his career and that his sister Rachel and his father Stanley have been lying as well? Not only that, they have been egging him on to lie even more. When they said the same identical sentence almost, they said he hadn't gone far enough in his lying, racist, hateful attack on Muslim women wearing burqas or headgears, that they looked like bank robbers. And Rachel Johnson, the feminist, wanted Boris Johnson to attack the women more. And this lying Daily Mail, admitting the lying, Boris Johnson has failed, now confessing. Now, what is the point of this item on page 3? Barbados gets ready to ditch the Queen. And Boris Johnson is still accusing the EU of bad faith, while he climbs down and makes a deal with the Conservatives, so-called Brexit rebels. And there is an anti-dog repetition in the Daily Mail of this story on the front page of the Daily Mirror yesterday, which is a completely misleading kind of piece. But there is a confession again about Boris Johnson's failures. This two-page spread on the failure of this testing regime. Now, I would be talking more about the failure of the medical research establishments. And there is this item about national curfew. This is a kind of step, which is the kind of thing that is used by those who are campaigning against wearing face masks and the lockdown. And they're saying that this is kind of against civil liberties and civil rights. My question about the medical research and establishment or establishments is this: what are the actual facts, and why have you collectively not found remedies for the likes of the COVID-19 virus? Don't tell me about vaccine. That is very, very seriously controversial for very good reasons. Tell me about the actual sequence, the composition, the constitution of this thing. And contextually tell me about all the other illnesses that we know exist and repeatedly attack people every year. The flu, the various types of flu. What are the actual evidence on all the research, all the investigation? And if the research and the investigation has not been completed or cannot be completed due to lack of resources, why haven't the medical research establishments made that the point? Have they made it? I haven't seen. I have not seen in the last 8 months any evidence of the medical establishment, either in the UK or anywhere else in the Western European countries or in the USA, except that the disputes between Trump and the medical research establishments is a bit different. So the comparison cannot be made as a straightforward comparison. But essentially, my point is, what have the medical establishments, objectively speaking, said about any lack of resources? Because if the medical establishment can keep quiet about the effects of climate change and all the other kind of true events affecting the very future survival of the planet and of the humanity, if they can keep quiet about the perpetuation of nuclear arsenals and the allied threats that are there ever ready to destroy the whole planet. That doesn't speak well about the social consciousness and awareness and responsibility of the medical research establishments. If I've got that wrong, and if they've been making noises that I have missed, which is factually impossible because I am monitoring and watching and observing, quote, the news, contextual news as well as local news as well as specialist news. So where have they said it that I have missed? And that is the question that is running through the whole of the narrative. Quite apart from the political kind of, quote, exchanges and, quote, points, quote, scoring, the real objective, non-partisan, universally verifiable, checkable, evidential question is, what are the medical research establishments saying as an excuse, as a reason for this pandemic, quite apart from the resources? Pandemic being beyond prevention or cure or stopping. What is the maximum amount of unanimity, agreement among the various schools or various branches or various kind of factions of the medical research establishments? What are the maximum things that they agree on? Put aside the ones that they disagree on, but what are the maximum numbers? What are the areas that can be accessed by the people, populations, demographies, the world, policymakers, actual administrators, and actual operators of any program to help people avoid, and then survive. Avoid and also survive, depending on what stage of contract they are at in relation to this particular infection and virus and pandemic, whatever. These are the things that the media do not talk about. So this is my at once diagnostic comment about the Fleet Street as well as about the medical research establishment. Singular and plural, in one country and in other countries, locally and universally. So there is this question about Dido Harding. She is the one that has been over-feted, F-E-T-E-D, feted, as in kind of rewarded, congratulated, and promoted, and given extra privilege by the succession of conservative leaders, David Cameron, the Brexit disaster man, and Boris Johnson. Now she is being now called the testing disaster by the Daily Mail. And they've got their kind of jobbing in-house kind of crier of bogus excuses and bogus kind of concern. Andrew Pierce. Andrew Pierce is a supporter of Tony Blair's war on the Iraqi women, children, and innocent people. Andrew Pierce and Michael Gove and Julia Hartley Brewer. These are three of the people who were given regular platforms by the BBC and the so-called anti-Brexiteer Gavin Esla when he fronted the Dateline London slot on the BBC News Channel. So these people have no moral background. There is no moral ground for them to pretend to be morally outraged by anything. Andrew Pierce most certainly is not. Andrew Pierce most certainly is not a moral person. He is an opportunist, and he is a hired and in-house residential kind of perpetrator of lies for the Daily Mail and the right wing and the racists and the warmongers and the Brexiteers, of course. And the migrants are being treated as some kind of joke by the Daily Mail. In the very week that the United Nations Human Rights Council, or whatever it is called, is in session, 45th annual session, I think. So they are having a sadistic, sick-making kind of go at the migrants. As if the migrants are some kind of engaged in some kind of joke, some kind of game, some kind of sport, escorted away by the French. They're being kind of pounced on, assaulted, dragged away, and then bailed out by the Brits. Now, the Daily Mail, the racist, anti-French kind of fronted Daily Mail, is celebrating the French being escorting away the migrants. So they're putting a positive kind of gloss on the French and their behavior against the migrants. And they're condemning the Brits, the agency, then bailed out by the Brits, as if these migrants do not deserve to live, that they should not be allowed to live. That's the line. So anyone who says that the Daily Mail is only reporting the facts is absolutely deluded. That headline, or those lines of the headline or the heading, is not fact. It is their prejudice, their contempt for human rights. And Anthony Guterres, who has been giving exclusive UN television news conferences, preaching as ever, doesn't seem to have come across the Daily Mail or any of the anti-migrant British tabloid, Fleet Street, racist outlets or propaganda sheets that are forever targeting the gullibles and brainwashing the gullibles. And the gullibles, as I have said, constitute the majority of the indigenous white people in Britain, whose brains are being washed for lying, and they're being primed to hate anyone who doesn't look like, quote, Brits. And the majority of the targeted people are in England. So the Little Englander is very much being revived every day by the Daily Mail. So the Daily Mail has got a question on a piece that it is running across 2 pages, pages 14 and 15. And it is saying, how could BBC let comic joke about killing whites? Now, this is something that I have not watched on the video, but I am only relying on what the Daily Mail has put in here. So that's the So first off, this is not something that is to be kind of put at the door of the BBC only. The Black Lives Matter, this phrase, 3 words, of course, sum up a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions. But the movement behind Black Lives Matter, in fact, has existed for a long time, for as long as Black people, in this context, referring to people of mainly African origin, brought as slaves to the USA and to the UK and other European countries. So as long as slavery has been in action, Black Lives Matter as the cry has existed. Not, of course, in the way that they are making this cry appear today, these days, after the murder of Floyd in the USA by the police. But the cry for justice has been there from every victim of slavery, every victim of murder, every victim of denial of Black lives, every life. And extrapolated across the other ethnic groups and the original nations, these are not people that should be called American Indians. These are original nations of that continent. People right across the whole of the continent we called America. All these people, original nations who are massacred, slaughtered, and genocided by the Spanish, by the French, by the British, by the Irish, and all the other Europeans that invaded the continent. So the original nations, and Canada, of course, Canada is included in America. The original nations deserve total, unconditional justice. Belated, but unconditional justice. So when Black Lives Matter is a contemporary kind of adoption, it is not a contemporary cause. It is a cause that encompasses the cry for justice going back centuries. 700 years. 700 years of genocide of the original nations by European nations. That is what Black Lives Matter should be contexted in. So whoever is this kind of comic Sophie that the Daily Mail is focusing on as being the person who said that the whitey should be killed and all the rest of it on the BBC. This person and everyone else, including those who are credited with the coinage of this phrase, Black Lives Matter, need to take into account 700, 800 years of racist murders, massacres, and genocides. So there is no evidence that Daily Mail even knows about that history and that kind of legacy and that uncounted numbers of victims. These were not, the white people were not the victims. It's not a matter of opinion, it is fact. So that doesn't mean, personally, I don't believe any people should be targeted or violated or denied as based on their ethnicity, their race, or their faith or no faith, whatever, or their gender, or whatever classification that exists. And of course, I don't believe in war as being any solution. I believe in education. Education not in the sense of the Oxbridge or Harvard or MIT and all those continuation of lies institutions, but education as objective evidence of human condition and human experience and human universal entitlement to human equality. And education has not been in place anywhere for those 700 years. Miseducation. So I say to anyone who says fake news, it's not fake news suddenly discovered by Donald Trump. Fake news has been the news all the time. In the package that has been in each of the newspapers in the USA and in the UK and the rest of Europe and other countries that followed, because of the control of the various means, the agenda has been a propaganda agenda. Take this. This is the diagnosis. I am saying world exclusive diagnosis of the media in Fleet Street, but I'm covering all the equivalents in the USA, New York and Washington, Los Angeles, whatever. When in April 1990, the Los Angeles Times ran a piece promoting the racist criminal Tebbit, Norman Tebbit, demanding that the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, the Indians in the UK should take the cricket test in order to prove their legitimacy as being entitled to anything, quote, the wonderful Britain offers. The Los Angeles Times was continuing that racist, genocidal criminality because it assumed that Tebbit was the definitive, authoritative source of morality, legitimacy, ethics, and accuracy and veracity and all the rest of it. All of that is totally wrong, but that is what has been perpetrated by the Los Angeles Times, which boasts as being one of the leading platforms, media of the USA. So the LA Times is a lying, racist, genociding organ of propaganda of ideological massacres, ideological genocides, and ideological fake news, because they promoted Norman Tebbit as an epitome and a symbol of respectability, reliability, and patriotism. The patriotism was reflecting. They were obviously reflecting the British or English-centric patriotism, and they were sharing in it. So the Black Lives Matter campaign has to be wider, far, far wider in terms of its understanding, in terms of the analysis, than it has been so far, at least as far as I have been able to access it through the racist media. And there is a point that somebody called Stafford Scott I'm located originally in Haringe, who has been given an absolutely incredible kind of promotion by the racist outfit that Steve Bannon set up and ran, and is run in the UK, or the UK operation of which is run by Donald Trump's kind of followers and colluders. And it is the organ that has said that Scott is saying that the Labour Party is racist and that there is no one looking out for the black people. It is just us, he is quoted as saying. There is no justice, and in a kind of rhyme, he says, it is just us. Well, that is in essence accurate to the extent that it goes. If that is the case, then where has he been since the events of October 1985? I think that's when the Broadwater Farm thing happened. I can check the year, because all these protests against the murder of the black persons by the police, or in police custody, or during police operations, all these protests have fizzled out, and they have not been followed up intellectually, evidentially, and ethically or morally. In fact, some of the most kind of eager grabbers of the opportunities created by these protests have been stooges. A lot of them have been mixed race stooges operating among black people or in the name of black people in the context of the African descent. And these criminals have made careers, and they have been installed. A number of these criminals have been installed by the racist academic institutions in academic positions. These criminals have been given academic recognition, like given PhDs and given lecturership, or even promoted to quote professor. And there is nothing in what they have said, and there is nothing they will ever say in any of the dissertations approved of by racists, giving them these doctorates and whatever. There is nothing in those dissertations or pre-doctoral, post-doctoral, so-called kind of quote work that actually challenges the essential lies of the last, let's say, 700 years in the context of the Black Lives Matter. And these criminals have exploited and kind of misappropriated the work of ordinary people and the work of the ordinary victims of racism at every stage. And they've given academic gloss and created a false, totally false, opportunistic narrative that targets the original victims or original fighters in the communities. And by targeting them, these criminals come to the fore, and they say, we are the double kind of sources of authenticity. We are black, and we are also intelligent. They suggest that the actual fighters and people on the streets and generally in the communities are not intelligent. And this is something that has been going on in the UK. But in the UK, whatever happens in this context, it is only a continuation or imitation of what happens in the USA, as I have pointed out before. When Obama was inserted into the White House the first time, the edition of the BBC Question Time that followed soon after that had almost half of the audience members looking like they had African background. Now look at the Question Time over the last decades. You cannot see that. But that's what the BBC was doing. So today's Daily Mail saying, how could the BBC do this and allow this comic on the Frankie Boyle kind of program to say these things about Whitey? It is absolutely stupid of the Daily Mail. The BBC is the source, the biggest source of fakery and fake news, has been for decades, for 70 years. So we shall move on. This has been the tutorial aspect of this. We shall move on to this racist kind of grotesque attack on the migrants in the middle of the channel. And they're saying that this is the grim political undercurrents, migrant trafficking. They don't say the human rights being violated. They say migrant trafficking. So they're always deflecting attention from the truth of the matter. One more look at this one. How could the BBC do this? And the Daily Mail is saying that the anti-racists who have been kind of given a distorted tag by the racists called woke. So they're saying that this woman, Gillian Philip, who is the author of books including Clickbait for Children and Young Adults, has been subjected to death threats, vile abuse, and she's saying that they have killed off the anti-racists, have killed off the basic human decency. And the headline in the editorial comment, the first of the three, I mean, it's a concession to the truth. It's a sub-concession. It's a partial concession to the truth about Boris Johnson's failure. He says that Boris is flunking the coronavirus test. And Stephen Glover is continuing his own exceptional kind of thing on the headline front, at least. He's not targeting Boris Johnson. That is the strategy. They're still protecting and shielding him. And they're celebrating the mass murderer of Iraqis, Tony Blair, who is behind Trump's Middle East peace deal. And they're calling him rock star. So there it is. To the Daily Mail, Tony Blair is still the rock star. And it is quite clear why they celebrate him as the rock star. And we are leaving aside the promotion of Hugo Swear's wife and her diaries. And the Epstein story is on the pages 26, 27. And it is they are still shielding Andrew, and they are targeting this Epstein because he can't answer back. They are not talking about Andrew. So that is a lie. They should be talking about Andrew, and they should be talking about the ones who are alive and the others. And the Daily Mail does not want accountability by local councils. So the fly tippers that the Daily Mail is featuring as destroying the local environments are being blamed out of context, because the fly tippers can only do whatever they get up to if the local council is not doing its job. And most local councils, as viewers of this broadcast series would know, most local councils are corrupt. And they are beyond accountability. Nobody is holding them to account. And in the case of councils where the structure is elected or executive mayor, quote, led, I would say fronted, the accountability is totally unheard of. So the Daily Mail doesn't believe in democracy. I'm quoting today's Daily Mail, fly tipping. It doesn't say what I'm saying should happen, that there should be democratic service, democratic answerability, democratic accountability by the elected councillors and the elected mayors, and the council employees should be held to account. And there should be a locally run, locally devised, locally configured, ongoing 24/7 program of education covering every aspect of the local society or the local community. And I'm here saying that there should be a few million genuine jobs created in this country alone, to look at the environment, to look after the environment, to uphold human rights and animal welfare and the environment. Few million people are needed. Is the Labour Party even aware of the possibility of that? And the Labour Party's front person yesterday was changed. It was Angela Rayner who was slotted into the spot where she apparently addressed Boris Johnson. But she was as shallow as she had been before, as the Labour Party personnel had been before, including Keir Starmer. As I said, there was a moment of exception with Ed Miliband on Monday, but that is going to remain the exception. Should become the norm, but it will remain the exception. So Angela Rayner didn't say anything, didn't suggest anything that remotely resembles, let alone represents or reflects, the reality of what this society needs. The society doesn't need Angela Rayner trying to imitate Ed Miliband and grabbing some headlines. That is not what society needs. The society doesn't need the Labour Party imitate the Tories or any other party. Society needs a program that addresses the communities and people and the realities. None of that has been in evidence in the House of Commons or through the MPs yesterday. Now, the question that I asked about the medical research establishments, about the state of knowledge about this particular virus and other diseases, is not answered in this Guardian question and answer column, which is what have we learned about the virus since the crisis began? And I'm going by their kind of headlines to each column. They're saying steroids work, the virus is in saliva. Virus tests can be misleading. The old are most vulnerable. The most devastating impact of the COVID-19 has been in care homes and among other elderly people. For them, the virus has a fatality rate thousands of times higher than in children. Surely our first thought in responding to a resurgence in the cases should be to protect those most at risk, said Mark Woodhouse, an infectious disease specialist at University of Edinburgh and a member of the government's modeling advisory group. We know much more now about who is most at risk and how they're likely to be exposed and how to protect them. That's hard-won knowledge. Let's use it. Now, they don't say how. They claim that they have learned how this happens, but they don't describe the process. So therefore, this is only a very half-hearted kind of column that doesn't get to the core of the facts that really matter. If the agenda is to help save lives and prevent infection and protect the most vulnerable. And there is this Guardian piece about Robert Buckland, who is the Secretary of State for so-called justice, that he should be forced to resign because of the disastrous Boris Johnson law-breaking thing. And John Crace, in his sketch about yesterday, when Angela Rayner, which I have mentioned already, faced Boris Johnson. John Crace is saying that Boris Johnson at least wasn't rude, but he has not done his homework as usual. And Aditya Chakraborty in the Guardian, the heading to his piece is, "Why is testing in crisis? Don't blame the public or the state." And it is more details of test facilities not being available. And what actually is coming across is that the press, the media, are tinkering at the edges. This Aditya Chakraborty is a typical tinkerer. being on The Guardian, he has to be a tinkerer. The Guardian, in common with the rest of Fleet Street, leaves out the serious assumption, which is that public bodies, publicly paid bodies, agencies, and publicly paid for employees, whether in the health service or anywhere else, are there to deliver the service that suits the needs, and that there is no way that they will be doing their job and helping people, delivering the services, if the predominant culture is one of no accountability. Nowhere in this country is there the culture of accountability, answerability at any level, regardless of any party, political, or ethnicity based kind of identity or linkage. Essentially, this should be objective, universal, and regardless of these various kind of background or identities. Human needs, whether in illness or in health, whatever the needs are, if they are already designed to be delivered by somebody else who is considered worth paying for it and is kept in publicly funded payment or otherwise publicly kind of contributed to paid positions, then those people should be held to account when it matters. When it matters in the sense that when they don't only get held to account when they're about to be killing children, like the doctors at the Royal London Hospital tried to kill the child of a couple of parents from Newham who had to fight a battle and then take the matter to the High Court and then get the permission of the court to take the child to Italy, where she is still alive, or she lived far longer than the killing project of the Royal London Hospital doctors had anticipated. So there is no accountability there, which means that only exceptional cases can be raised and brought to the public attention. That should not be the case, because it then leaves out the majority to suffer and to be left to die of neglect and criminality and other abuses of positions of power that various decision makers in the cases affecting people's lives are actually allowed to do the things, whatever the things they do or get up to, they want to do, whimsically or as sociopaths and other kind of deviants from their duties. So the culture of accountability has to be established. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anywhere in public life. And that is the most clear evidence of dysfunction and failure that this virus has brought to the fore. So the Daily Mail saying that Boris Johnson admits failure, we have failed, is only tip of the iceberg. The failure is wider spread than the Daily Mail is allowing to be spotted in there. So this is the Guardian talking about dyslexia and other supplements, world food and things. So we should leave that aside, because the Guardian is not telling the truth about the world. It's kind of it's completely kind of faking everything. And the Daily Mirror is saying that the Tories are not testing. Again, a very safe kind of opportunist headline. this doesn't lose the Daily Mirror any claim to being an anti-Tory party paper. But that's not the truth. As I said, the whole thing boils down to the entirety of the local councils, the other agencies, including the NHS agencies, being unaccountable. So when they say that the headlines covering the encounter by Ed Miliband against Boris Johnson said that Miliband had blamed Boris Johnson for blaming other people, and he should be stopping blaming other people. They missed the point. It's not just Boris Johnson who is blaming other people. This is the culture. They go around and they blame the other person, whoever is kind of plausibly considered to be blameworthy. So that is the other side, or the creation, or the result, or the consequence of there being no accountability. If there was running and a rigorous culture of accountability right across the board, then you could not find anyone really succeeding or successfully blaming somebody else. The buck had to stop with them, and the buck doesn't stop. In fact, in Britain, nobody knows where the buck is. When you have a complaint against the most powerful forces operating in the name of public kind of approval, for example, the police, where do you start? Police is assumed to have the legitimacy and the authority and the approval of the public. But where do you start if anything goes wrong with it? Any police person or personnel abusing their power? That's an example. You don't have anything. And the same applies to the judiciary. The same applies to other institutions and agencies, including the local councils. As I have been saying, the local councils are supposedly being held to account for their miscarriages or misdeeds and wrong things by the so-called local government ombudsman, which on the facts, on its behavior is a joke. And the same thing applies to all the other so-called ombudsmen. When it comes to the legal ombudsman, it is not a joke. It's an additional sickness and a nightmare that the complainant against any licensed law trader is subjected to. So it goes on. The whole society is out of order when it comes to the individual being denied their rights, or the family unit that are kind of unable to organize sufficient resources to raise a voice against injustice. So hundreds of thousands of people are denied justice, fairness, fair treatment every day in Britain. Reading the Fleet Street papers, you would not imagine that is happening. Reading the Guardian, you wouldn't see that. And this diversity display, one of the diversity displays on the Guardian, Aditya Chakravarti, is a typical example of the denying culture of the Guardian. He thinks he's a radical. He doesn't know what being radical means or entails or involves. He has got a career and is quite complacent, like Owen Jones, being a Guardian columnist or Guardian kind of name. These people have no clue, but they are slaughtered as, quote, radicals. They're not radicals at all. So they're not answering the question raised by the lies of the likes of the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Sun, and the Boris Graph. and the BBC. And the Guardian's equivalent, in a way, is the Daily Mirror. And they're saying that Boris Johnson is still blaming other people. He admits not enough testing, but he blames the public for the farce. Northeast faces tougher rules. Now, that is the Daily Mirror coverage of Angela Rayner's kind of standing in for Keir Starmer. A man called Keir Starmer had sent her a message. And Keir Starmer is, of course, in self-isolation. And they're saying in the editorial to Boris Johnson to make it work. They're saying, just make it work. And it goes on, but the question I raised about the medical research establishments is still relevant, even despite all these kind of details. And he's catching up, this Kevin McGuire. He says that Boris Johnson spouts Latin, but he will never say mea culpa. I have been saying that Latin is another language. It doesn't have to be shrouded in mystery. Latin is another language. So if Boris Johnson is a liar, he can lie in Latin. It doesn't make any difference because it's another language. It is the same substance, the same dishonesty. So there is nothing in any of the papers so far about the removal of the ban on evictions. And they've got a sob story about Katie Price, also known as Jordan, who kind of launched herself as a blonde and as a body. And the Mirror is boasting about how it reported on the mass murderer, Nielsen. And the Daily Mirror is not at all touching anything about the lack of culture of accountability anywhere. It has got loads and loads of typically tabloid garbage and boasts and bragging about little investigations. These are not relating to the dominant culture of unaccountability at every level, which is what should happen and should be the contents of the so-called popular press. The popular press was not serving the people. And this is repeated. The Daily Mirror's boast about the mass murderer Nielsen is repeated as the front page splash on the Daily Star, which is now the Daily Mirror stablemate, is the same stable that owns both the Mirror and the Daily Star. And there is no investigation. It is the tabloid thing about curfews and chaos, but no evidence of any real investigation and no evidence of any interest or awareness, interest in or awareness in the need for accountability by everyone who is in post, paid to deliver the service, real service, effective service at the point of need. And they're not calling him a racist, they're reporting him as somebody who has made a race rant. He's being accused of making a race rant is 1,000 miles away from his being called a racist. Very different. And that's what the Daily Star is calling Jim Davidson. He's slammed. They're not calling in the headline that he should be prosecuted, let alone that even if he is prosecuted, he will be allowed to walk free, because the legal bureaucracy is protective of racists, as dozens of prosecutions have shown over the years. No racist is convicted of racism. That is the norm in the British, English-centric, corrupt court system. And they're promoting Maureen Lipman, which is bad enough, without going into the details of how they're promoting her. And the Murdoch's son has taken over the place of, or the role of, the Daily Express, left by Beaverbrook, as the poisonous platform to promote Boris Johnson at any cost. So they're saying he is now the savior of Christmas. So they're giving him a gloss there as the Father Christmas now. He's promising to save Father Christmas. He plunged the country into Brexit denial. And now they're saying that he's Father Christmas. And they're saying that the EU is abusing Britain. So he's still lying about the EU and lying against the EU and trying to stay on board the Brexit kind of thing. And the son is aiding and abetting him. And they're in denial of his failures that he has admitted about the test, and not just the test, but the rest of the care that the community and society is entitled to and needs in the face of the pandemic. So they're saying they are running this pun at the expense of the EU. And they are not talking about the actual extent of the lies and law breaking in the context of that particular agreement that Boris Johnson is breaking. And the headline is also against the EU and treating the EU as a bunch of children, saying that the EU is doing tantrums. And they're running a full page apology for the wife of Elphik, the convicted conservative racist. He's not convicted of racism, as I said yesterday. He's convicted of chasing two women and kind of sexual so-called assault. He would never be convicted of racism. He should have been prosecuted dozens of times for inciting people across the Kent coastline against the migrants over years of his kind of career. And that is the career his wife has taken over from him. And she is now going back on her initial kind of claim that she was disgusted by his behavior. Now she has been given a space on the Times yesterday and is given a whole bigger space in the Sun today, backing him. So not only is there no narrative of accountability, there is a brazen promotion and propaganda for racists and wrongdoers in the media. They don't have any problem with the inciters of hate and breakers of the law. So the I newspaper is trying to just about kind of stay, almost just about to stay sane in a street of shame and insanity, backing Boris Johnson. And it is saying that Johnson reaches deal with rebels. Now, these are not rebels. These are people that are the most or least rebellious.